In a world where mega company Vought owns 7 of Earth's most powerful superheroes, a group of mercenaries, who each have their own score to settle, vows to expose the truth behind those blessed with special abilities. After killing Translucent, Huey, Billy, and Frenchie recruited Mother's Milk to stake out Popclaw's apartment and discover she and her boyfriend A-Train have been using Compound V, a serum that boosts physical abilities. The group then blackmails Popclaw with an incriminating video to tell them where A-Train runs the substance. There, Frenchie sets a female soup free, but when they realize A-Train is also pursuing her, they're determined to reach her first. After Huey learns Annie is Starlight, he gathers information about the 7 during their date. Meanwhile, Homelander and the Deep find Translucent's remains along with a threatening message. Then, Stillwell sends Homelander and Queen Maeve to save a hijacked plane, but after he accidentally destroys the control panel, he abandons the passengers. Despite Maeve's pleas, Homelander uses the plane crash to gain public support for allowing superheroes in the military, potentially earning Vought billions of dollars. In Havana, A-Train visits his girlfriend Popclaw, whom he's relocated to the island to keep safe. He tells her that Vought has permitted them to announce their relationship publicly, but before they can do so, he needs to know who she told about Compound V. Popclaw hesitates, but eventually comes clean and tells him about the 4 men who blackmailed her into telling them. Disappointed, A-Train uses his super speed to stick needles into his girlfriend's arms, pumping her with a lethal dose of an illegal substance enough to end her life. Minutes later, A-Train arrives at the Seven's conference room and informs Homelander Popclaw's been taken care of. Homelander then admits he's known A-Train's been using Compound V for weeks, but the speedster promises he hasn't used it in days. Homelander thanks A-Train for coming to him for help and says he'll always be there for him. Then the men share an awkward hug. Before A-Train leaves, Homelander reminds him to keep searching for the escaped female soup. Meanwhile, Frenchie prepares a fancy meal for the silent soup chained up in the corner of the room. The man wants her to tell him any information she knows so they can go after the people who experimented on her. At the Believe Expo, Huey joins Starlight just before she's about to do a panel. She introduces him to her mother, Donna, who doesn't seem pleased they're dating. On the main stage, famous Christian superhero Ezekiel gives a rousing sermon about how soups like himself were chosen and blessed with their abilities, to the audience's delight. In the crowd, Billy instructs Huey to gain backstage access using Starlight's influence, so he can speak to Ezekiel and blackmail him using incriminating footage of him being intimate with 2 men in a club. Mother's Milk, or MM, thinks Huey isn't ready for such a task, and the young man agrees, but Billy reminds him he's already taken out a suit before, which means he's capable. Meanwhile, Homelander speaks to the grieving loved ones of the passengers of the hijacked plane. Queen Maeve stands behind him, but the guilt she feels as he lists off the names of the passengers forces her to step away for a moment. Back at the Believe Expo, Starlight joins the teen roundtable and is asked about her purity. She's about to answer honestly, but the pastor gives her a look, so she lies and says she's chaste. After the panel, she expresses her remorse for lying to the teens, but Donna reminds her she's famous now and millions of kids look up to her. Seconds later, Huey speaks to Starlight and asks if she could hook him up with backstage passes to meet Ezekiel, saying his father is a big fan. She finds his request odd, but obliges anyway. Later, Homelander arrives at the expo for his speech. When he finds out that Vought VP Madeline Stillwell isn't there to help him with the talking points, he flies to her location to confront her. Madeline says she had to take her baby Teddy to the pediatrician and thinks the speech prepared for Homelander is good enough. He disagrees and expresses thinly veiled resentment for Madeline's prioritizing of the baby over him. Exasperated, the woman states their working relationship needs boundaries. That afternoon, Billy visits his sister-in-law Rachel to confront her about her family placing a tombstone over his late wife Becca's empty grave. Rachel explains their family wants to move on after 8 years of the authorities finding no trace of her sister, and she thinks Billy should do the same. In Popclaw's apartment, A-Train watches footage from a hidden camera inside a stuffed animal and sees Frenchie. He has the picture printed by the crime analysts in the 7th Tower, where Trevor informs him that the guy in the picture has over 34 registered addresses and is challenging to track down. Inside Ezekiel's tent, Homelander speaks to Huey and recognizes him as Starlight's friend whom she gave premium access to. Huey says he's known Starlight for a few weeks, and the soup seems wary of their closeness in a short time. Seconds later, Ezekiel takes all the VIPs behind another curtain to a baptismal pool. He and Homelander will rebaptize everyone in the room, and Huey becomes concerned. When it's his turn, Homelander notes his high blood pressure, which Huey reasons is due to his fear of water. Homelander then plunges him into the pool for a little too long despite the young man struggling to breathe. When he finally lifts him back up, Huey is coughing up and gasping for air. After the ceremony, Huey waits for everyone else to leave so he can be alone with Ezekiel. Unfortunately, the baptism caused the phone with the incriminating video to malfunction. Thinking on his feet, Huey pretends he's one of the men Ezekiel has been intimate with. Threatened, Ezekiel uses his elastic powers to grab Huey by the throat. The young man says he has a video that his friend will hospital release if anything happens to him. Ezekiel lets him go and asks what he wants, so Huey says he wants to know what Ezekiel's charity, Samaritan's Embrace, is shipping in their boxes. Later, Huey calls from a borrowed phone and says Ezekiel ships Compound V to different hospitals around the country through his charity. The latest shipment is arriving at the NICU in Mercer Hospital tonight. In the cemetery, Billy knocks down Becca's tombstone with a sledgehammer. On the main stage, Homelander abandons the script and uses the exposure to rile up the people to pressure Congress into voting to pass the bill allowing soups in the military. Madeline watches the speech from her home and is infuriated. That night, Queen May visits her ex-girlfriend Elena, who isn't pleased to see her. When Elena tries to get her to leave and return to Homelander, Maeve breaks down, racked by the immense guilt of leaving the people on the plane. When Elena asks her what's wrong, she kisses the woman who isn't in the mood and wants Maeve to leave. Elsewhere, Cherie calls Frenchie to warn him Black Noir is looking for him because she spotted him outside her place. At Mercer Hospital, Billy steals a key card from a nurse before receiving a call from Frenchie informing him that he's been burnt and plans to go into hiding. He asks Billy what to do with the female soup, and Billy says to leave her, but Frenchie vehemently disagrees. After the call, Billy uses the key card to get him and MM into the NICU. At the expo, Starlight expresses her apprehension to speak on stage, vaguely noting how her worldview has changed after realizing being a part of the Seven wasn't what she thought it would be. Donna begs her daughter to push through with the speech because all her friends will be watching on TV. At Frenchie's place, his conscience compels him to unlock the female soup's chains to allow her to escape. In the Seven Tower, the Deep watches Starlight's speech on TV. During the speech, Starlight goes off script and rants about the hypocrisy of religion and mentions how an unnamed man violated her. The Deep knows he's who Starlight's alluding to and gets worried. After the speech, the crowd is silent except for Huey's lone applause, proud of Starlight for standing up for herself. In the NICU, Billy and MM find IV bags of Compound V attached to several newborns, revealing that soups aren't born with their powers but are lab-made. Outside the expo grounds, Huey speaks to Starlight to console her. He comes clean and admits he recently lost his girlfriend, Robin, and nothing the entire day has helped him with what he's going through. Her speech was the only genuine thing he's witnessed today. The two then share a warm embrace. In the NICU, armed men shoot at Billy and MM. Billy gets an idea, pulls one of the incubators toward him, and uses the newborn's blue laser eyes to dispose of the shooters. At her office, Madeline sees Homelander spying on her from the hallway and calls him inside. She acknowledges how she hasn't been paying him enough attention lately and lets him lay his head down on her lap as he suckles from her fingers like an infant. In a dark alley, Black Noir finds Frenchie and menacingly approaches him. Suddenly, the female soup runs into Black Noir and knocks him aside. Then, she signals Frenchie to run away. The woman and Black Noir get into a fight, with the experienced soup coming out victorious after incapacitating her with blades to her foot and her torso. After Black Noir leaves, Frenchie comes out of hiding and sadly places his jacket over the woman's lifeless body. Seconds later, the soup lets out a gasp and Frenchie watches the gaping wound on her body heal itself. 2 weeks later, Starlight still hasn't shown up for work at the Seven Tower to record her portion of the group's cheesy promotional video. She's on a date with Huey at a bar, where she meets Anthony, one of Huey's childhood friends. Anthony hasn't heard from Huey since the incident at the store, and was worried he'd been hurting himself following Robin's passing. Huey assures him he's doing alright, and Anthony commends him for moving on with a great girl. While Homelander shoots in his childhood home for the promotional video, he becomes upset about a blanket on his bed and storms off the set. In the safe house, MM catches everyone up on what they know so far. Ezekiel's charity, Samaritan's Embrace, is bankrolled by Vought. The charity has been shipping Compound V to 53 hospitals across the country since 1971, disguised as vaccine shipments. None of the soups who've ever existed were born with special powers, but gained the abilities because of the blue serum. Billy asks MM if there's a record of Homelander being one of the experimental babies, but MM says his are the only records scrubbed from existence. While MM briefs the team, the female soup constantly interrupts him by gathering writing materials from the table. Frenchie brings up that the female soup isn't lab-made because they know she was injected with Compound V while imprisoned as an adult. He also adds that she can resurrect herself. When the group is about to go their separate ways, Huey assumes he'll simply continue hanging out with Starlight to collect info. Billy doesn't seem pleased by his fondness for the soup, so he wants the young man to accompany him for the day. In Madeline's office, Starlight runs into Ashley, who's just been fired for poorly handling Starlight's appearance at the Believe Expo. Later, Madeline calls Starlight selfish for ignoring her duties to the Seven and expects her to do as the company says. Starlight stands her ground and wishes to no longer do red carpet appearances or reality TV shows and wants to keep wearing her original costume. Madeline threatens to kick her out of the Seven, but Starlight knows she'd never do that because of the PR nightmare they'd have to deal with if they fired her after she announced she'd been violated in the workplace. Madeline feigns ignorance about who it could have been that took advantage of the young woman, but Starlight knows she's aware it's the Deep. During A-Train's segment shoot, he fails to run his usual record time, disappointing his brother. The producer then asks him to say a little message on camera for Popclaw, whom he was in a teen superhero group with. A-Train doesn't want to talk about his ex-girlfriend, so he lies and says he hasn't seen her in years. In the elevator, Maeve calls Starlight's recent behavior an act under the guise of empowerment. Starlight insists she's only speaking the truth, then calls Maeve out for how different she is in real life compared to the heroic image the media has portrayed. At the safe house, Frenchie suggests taking the female Soup to Mesmer, a telepath, so they can find out more about where she comes from, but MM thinks it's a bad idea. Meanwhile, Billy takes Huey to a support group meeting for collateral damage survivors. One of the attendees is Seth, a Vought marketing employee. He shares how he once made love with a Soup with ice powers, but then the Soup suddenly turned to ice in the middle of the act, causing his member to snap off. Huey realizes Billy brought him there to witness the stories of people whose lives have been drastically impacted by a Soup, almost like a warning for his growing closeness to Starlight. In the 7th Tower, Madeline tells the Deep he needs to apologize publicly for what he did to Starlight even before she publicly outs him. Madeline also wants him to indefinitely take a sabbatical to their headquarters in Sandusky, Ohio. At a Soup convention, Mesmer is signing autographs on a table next to a TV playing a trailer of his TV show, The Mesmerizer. Moments later, MM greets the celebrity and tells him he knows about him using his abilities for insider trading on Wall Street. Mesmer asks him who he is, so MM offers to hold his hand and let him read his mind. Mesmer discovers that MM knows his estranged daughter. Later that day, MM takes Mesmer to the park, where MM's friend from Child Services arranges for Mesmer and his daughter Cleo to meet. Grateful for speaking to his daughter, Mesmer offers his services to MM. Elsewhere, Billy and Huey sit on a park bench where the older man finally admits the reason for his intense hatred for Homelander. The Soup violated his wife 8 years ago, after which she just walked away and disappeared. Billy took Huey to that specific bench because that's where Becca was last spotted alive through security footage. She sat on the bench motionless for 3 hours, and he never heard from her again. Billy believes either Homelander ended her life or she did it herself. He then warns Huey to be careful around Starlight because she's still a Soup. Inside a barn, Homelander expresses his frustration with doing a house tour he never grew up in, telling a made-up backstory the writers wrote for him. He doesn't remember his parents or where he came from, and the company forcing him to play along to a fake origin story upsets him. Madeline understands his frustration, but she begs him to finish the tour for her. She touches him suggestively to get him to do her bidding, which ultimately works. At Mesmer's home, the telepath takes the female Soup's hand, and the visions they both experience rattles the woman, causing her to break the man's wrist. In pain, Mesmer wants them to leave his house, but MM calms him down and promises to mend his wrist if he continues reading the woman's mind. Seconds later, Billy calls MM, who initially lies about where they are, but Billy sees their location on a tracking app and plans to join them there soon. During Maeve's shoot, Elena interrupts and wants to ask her if she's alright after her impromptu visit to her apartment. Maeve acts aloof and says she just had too much to drink and only came over to hook up. Elena sees through her lies and knows Maeve is again putting up her emotional walls. In Mesmer's house, the telepath sees the female Soup as a rebel soldier fighting in the jungle for a faction represented by a red flag with a double-headed snake on it. MM states the flag is that of the Shining Light Liberation Army. In the garbage bin outside the house, Homelander finds the blanket and remembers himself as a baby inside a sterile room in a lab, playing peekaboo with 2 doctors with the blanket as his only possession. In Mesmer's home, Huey wonders why Vought would want to give Compound V to one of their adversaries. MM explains that this is all part of the company's plan to create supervillains worldwide, so that the US government won't have any other choice but to pay them to provide Soups to defeat the superpowered foes. With Billy threatening to dispose of the female Soup, believing she's a liability, Frenchie begs the woman to tell the others anything to convince them she isn't a bad person. The woman takes Mesmer's hand and shows him how she and her brother were abducted as children and forced to join the rebel army. She is Kimiko, and she just wants to return to the rebel camp to rescue her brother. Before leaving, Billy threatens to hurt Mesmer if he tells anyone about what transpired. Mesmer offers his hand, which Billy rudely declines. At a gas station, news of the Deep's public apology has spread, and a person from a passing vehicle breaks his truck's window. In the office of CIA Deputy Director Susan Rayner, Billy offers a sample of Compound V and proof of all Vought's wrongdoings in exchange for his list of demands of monetary compensation, an office, and a guarantee that Homelander is prosecuted. Rayner says she can get all of his demands but can't give him Homelander. She wants him to understand that going up against the Soup could lead to thousands of casualties, so they must tread the matter carefully. Betrayed, Billy leaves the office and takes the Compound V sample. In the safe house, Billy arrives and tells MM and Frenchie that Rayner couldn't authorize taking down Vought, but he left out the detail where he let his vendetta against Homelander get in the way of the CIA possibly helping them. He still plans to take down the company and Homelander and believes their personnel is enough to do the job. On a building rooftop, Mesmer Connor meets with Homelander and shows him pictures his doorbell camera took of the men who came to his house. Homelander lingers on Billy's picture, recognizing his face, before flying into the sky. In the bar, Starlight expresses her appreciation for Huey being the only bright spot in her tenure in New York. Huey sees Robin in the corner of the room, the guilt of moving on quicker than he had anticipated still eating at him. But after he pulls Starlight in for their first kiss, Robin disappears. Suddenly, Billy interrupts the couple and introduces himself as Huey's old friend. When Starlight steps away to grab them more drinks, Billy shows his disappointment that the young man continues to meet with the soup. Huey insists she's a good person and might even help their cause, but Billy leaves him to ponder how she'd feel if she found out he was the one who ended Translucent's life.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.